What's going on, everybody? Today we're back working on the Honda Civic. We got another big box in the mail, so you know what that means. More parts. We're going to increase the value of this little nugget a lot. Let's jump right into it. So once again, shout out to Yonaka and Street Imports hooking us up. We got us today magical. Not even gonna try, we'll throw you on the tripod. Ooh. Oh, oh my goodness. Wow. That's cool. Alright guys, so I've been just looking over this little nugget quickly, looking at all the features it's got, and it's actually pretty crazy. So this is designed for a 92, I believe, to 2000 Honda Civic. It is a direct replacement. Now, this is going to be sized for the D series hoses, so if you have a B series swap like me, you're just going to have to keep that in mind. These are going to be, the outlets are going to be a little bit smaller than B series requirements, so still going to need to do a hose swap or some sort of thing like that. Now, it does still retain the factory mounting points here, so it's super easy. There's going to be a bracket at the top we unbolt, and then we'll slide the entire rad towards the engine and then up and out, so it's super easy to do. This is only for the manual transmissions. They do have a triple core option as well, which is just a monster, but I got the dual core with a 12-inch fan. I believe it's 80 watts, something like that. And even this dual core flows, I believe it's something like 200% more coolant. Miss Mosquito. 200% more coolant than the factory. I think it's like a half or 5/8, probably 5/8 rad. So that's insane. So super straightforward. It does have the plastic petcock here to drain your coolant, and then you get a fancy new Yonaka Rad cap. So this thing is insane. 100% aluminum, weighs absolutely nothing at all. So now obviously if you guys are looking to pump out like 500 to 1,000 horsepower, you might want to go with the triple core. The only reason I went with the dual core is sometimes you may have some fitment issues with the triple if you have like a turbo setup or some fancy things going on. So eventually we may do a turbo, and I'm not sure the routing will go with the plumbing. So we're going to go dual, and I'm not making too much horsepower, maybe like up to 300, which is being generous. So we went with the dual. This will be more than enough, especially with how much it flows. And I really like the quality of this shroud. So it is detachable, just the 4 bolts here, pop it off. And this is a pretty universal size fan, so replacements in the future, super easy. But if it's anything like any of the other Yonaka parts I got, this thing is bulletproof and I'm going to love it. So let's go ahead and slam it on. Alright guys, so for this rad, we're going to need a jack and jack stands, or you can use some ramps here. You're going to need a funnel and some coolant and an old container to drain the coolant into. I like some WD-40 or some sort of penetrating fluid just to help the rad sit in those little rubber boots. Some pliers to help break that petcock loose. Some basic hand tools and maybe a flathead screwdriver. You may also need some regular pliers to get some of those hose clamps off if you have the clamping ones and not just the screw chamber style. And then depending on the wiring you're going to do or what fan you're going to use, you may need some crimp connectors, soldering iron, stuff like that, but pretty straightforward. Not many tools, specifically just 10 mils for the rad retaining clips, and that's pretty much it. So let's jump right into it. Alright guys, so we went ahead, we lifted the front of our car, we have it on jack stand safely, the rear wheel's chalked, and we're starting to drain our coolant. Now if you're not keeping the coolant, you can just pop the lower rad hose off and drain it into an oil pan, or drain pan, more importantly drain pan. However, we just did the engine swap, so this is all fresh coolant. So I am going to just put in a container here. That is, however, looking pretty dirty. So it's a good thing we have new coolant anyway. So I'm just going to drain it off into that. Easiest way to do that is going to be taking the rad cap off. It's a good time to take our overflow reservoir out. It just lifts up and out of the way. Set that aside. Grab yourself some pliers. Crawl underneath the vehicle and you will have a little screw here, a little petcock. Go ahead and loosen that off and you'll start to drain your coolant out. Let that drain and then we're ready to move on. Alright, so we went ahead, we got this all drained out into our pan. We got our upper rad hose removed. And then this is going to be a 10 mil here. You don't have to remove it all the way, you just loosen it. Lift this up and rotate. And your rad is now ready to come out. Also not a bad time to unplug your rad fan. And boom, out with the old. So now we can really see the difference between the new and the old here. So this one is originally an automatic. That's why we have these two lower fittings here. That's going to be for your trans cooler. So if you have a manual, you will not have those. Other than that, you can see how big this fan shroud is and how thin the rad actually is. So you look at it from the top and it looks huge, but the actual rad itself is paper thin. So we are upgrading to this dual core. Much thicker, beefier, all aluminum, and just absolutely gorgeous to look at. So what we're going to do to prepare for the install is we're going to chop the ends off of these bullet connectors. I'm going to solder on the original fan connector here just so it's plug and play with the factory harness. You don't have to do that. You can just use bullet connectors. However, this is what I'm going to go ahead and do. You do want to make sure you do have these wired in the correct way. This fan is supposed to be a sucking fan, so it's supposed to pull the air from the front through into the engine bay. If you do wire this up backwards, it will be blowing, and you'll be trying to push air towards the front of the car as you're driving. Kind of counterproductive, not the way it's supposed to be. So you want to make sure that you wire this up so it is sucking. So power negative, straightforward. Just got to double check when you have it in that you have your wiring correct. Other than this, we are going to swap over these little rubber feet that are probably seized on. That's not a bad idea to get new ones. We're going to take these off if they're in good shape. Go ahead, pop them onto there. So now at this point, you just slap it in the same way we took it out. Super easy. Alright, so we got our reservoir in, all our hose clamps tightened up. If you do have to go with the dual hose clamp setup, you want to make sure that you have the chambers offset a bit. As you tighten it down, it will have a raised portion underneath here. And if you have them in line, that is asking for a leak. So this is the correct way to do it, offset it. Ideally, you'd go 180 degrees, but that's what we went with. So I'm going to go ahead, button up the bottom one, then we just have to top up the fluids, and we got to start burping the system. So now when you're filling it up, one of these funnels is super helpful. This is going to help keep head pressure on the rad as you try and burp the system. But as you're doing this, it's not a bad idea to have a bit of water coolant inside of your overflow or recovery tank. And then going into your rad, you'll have this funnel that sits here. Now you can do this without it, and with a normal funnel and with a buddy or alone, but this is the easiest way, and this is what I have. That's what we're going to do. Alright guys, so at this point we're going to have our rad in, all the hoses done up, everything tightened, and the rad's not going to be wanting to go anywhere. And then we're going to pour an initial amount of coolant in, which I put about 3-4 liters in. You're going to check and make sure there's no leaks. And if everything else is looking good, we're ready to proceed. This is a good time to mention, this is a dual core with the rad fan. And with my AC lines, it is pretty tight. I did have to wiggle this one a little bit out of the way. So just keep in mind, if you do have AC, a triple core might be a little bit too much for you. Once we have everything in there, nice and happy, and it's looking fantastic, we are now ready to burp the system. And to burp the system properly, we're going to have the front of the car elevated, and the more the better, but this should be enough. So we have it on jack stands. We're going to go ahead and we're going to top it up with coolant until it's nice and full there in the rad and it's not taking any more. We're going to hop in the car, fire it up, crank the heat all the way and put in defrost mode so it's blasting at the windshield, and we're going to let it run. And if you're up here and you have a funnel like this, you'll see bubbles coming out, and if you're just pouring it in with a normal funnel, Again, you'll see bubbles coming up in the filler neck in the Rad, and that just means that it's forcing all the air out of the system. You may have a little bit of an airlock here at the thermostat, but that is what we're working with. Again, it will eventually stop until the engine gets to operating temperature, at which point the thermostat will open, and you'll more than likely see a little more bubbles come out, so that is normal. And this process does take a bit, so make sure you're in a well-ventilated area outside, and you have quite a bit of gas. So I'd say 20 minutes, especially on a hot day, should be enough to get start to finish. So we're gonna go ahead, hop inside, fill this up with coolant until it stops bubbling, fire it up, crank the heat, let her go. Now once you have this all burped, and it's not taking any more and the bubbles have stopped and it's done a few heat cycles, it's not a bad idea the next couple days of driving it, when it's cold, not hot, it's very important, pop the cap off, top it up, and then put the cap back on. Let it cool down after a drive, check it again, do that a couple times, just make sure it's nice and happy and topped up. Should be good to go. So I'll jump inside, fire it up, and we'll watch some bubbles, do bubbles here, area. Almost done. But damn, does that look good. And then to clarify on what I said earlier about the Rad fan to make sure it's going the right way, you want to make sure when it does have power, it is blowing the air inside of the engine bay. So it is sucking the air from the front, pushing it through the Rad into the engine bay. So fire it up, when it gets to temp, your fan will kick on, and you'll be able to put your hand here and make sure that it is blowing air against your hand. That way you know it's going the right way and you're good to go. Let's fire her up. I've been sitting in my driveway for 47 minutes, fan off, so I got a little switch for my fan. It won't overheat, so it's bloody hot out. I think we're just cracking 33 degrees today. Humid, but hot. It won't overheat, so I think the Rad's doing its job. I don't really think I even need a fan, so promising, I guess. But let's go take a look at it. This thing is beautiful. Everything's topped up, I've bled it. We are just going for our first test drive here. And this thing is a beast. Like, that is hands down. Like, B16, pretty cool, you know, nice header, all that stuff. AC, it's kind of neat. But that thing, that's one of my favorites. That Rad is gorgeous. These motor mounts are gorgeous, but I think the Rad, I think that wins. I'd absolutely recommend getting it with the Rad fan and shroud, because that is just like the perfect combo. So, very happy with this so far. It's killing it, man. It's doing a great job. So anyway, I don't know if you can tell I'm sweating because it's bloody hot out today, but this Rad, taking it like a champ. So there it is, Yonaka dual core Rad fan with the shroud, 12-inch fan, 200% more flow because it's a dual core, all aluminum. Thing weighs like 1.5 pounds, man. That thing is light. So definitely recommend. Dual core, perfect, especially with AC, perfect fit. Like I said, you can, I think they have a single core, but for 300 bucks with a fan and a shroud and everything you need, and it bolts right in, new Rad cap, all the goodies, can't beat that. So obviously you make 500 to 800 to a 3,000 horsepower triple core. This way with the dual core, I can stick with just that stubby Rad. I don't have to go full size Integra Rad or anything. So this is awesome, amazing quality, great bang for the buck. Thank you again, Yonaka and Street Imports. I'm bloody hot. I'm gonna go enjoy this Rad. I gotta drive my little nugget again, so see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.